had the privilege of speaking with the winner of the Philadelphia Citywide Challenge, addressing health issues for today's millennials. Her name is Nicole Kenney. Her story, in so many ways, is similar to the challenges faced by many Black women, yet she is able to achieve despite self-doubts, and with the help of others, she is succeeding. Her story is encouraging and raises the possibility that, put in the right environment with the proper support, we may all discover that there is a winner in all of us. I've broken down her story into 4 20 to 30 minute segments for you to consider and then discuss with another woman, your daughter, or friend. Starting segment 3, becoming an entrepreneur.
3 months go by, and I'm, talking with my aunties, and so what was happening is too, I'm in this documentary class, and I decide I'm going to do it on Black women. I'm going to do it on me, basically. I want to do it on me in this moment in my life. It was called It Starts With Me, and these conversations I'm having with my aunties. And I'm going to give people an inside look into kind of what that process was like. So seeing me kind of in this like super vulnerable space, getting the insight and guidance of women who are older than me, giving me really life advice,
That's very brave.
Yeah. I mean, I say that because I'm like, yeah. but here's the thing. It was when I did it, and it was very much focused on the Black woman's experience, you know what I mean? And so I did it literally, like, as I think I mentioned, just to show a potential employer. That's why I did it. So I was just like, this is going to explain my gap. So I'm going to say, I took this class. Here's my product. You can hire me. You know what I mean? Like, I use good use with my time. What I did not expect was at the end of the 14 weeks, there was a public viewing. And everyone in the class, it's just 5 of us, we showed our shorts. It was like 14 minutes. And people began to hire me to show my doc. And I tell people
started to do what?
Hire me. So I was going to churches. I went to colleges
to show
my documentary. Yeah, to connect with the women in the workforce.
Wow.
And I tell people that because
how did they even learn of it?
If they might have been at the showing, they might have like literally it was just word of mouth. Like, people were reaching out to me. People at my church had me come. And so
obviously what you were feeling was a shared experience.
Exactly. Yeah.
That people could all relate to.
Exactly. Yeah. And I got to say because that's how I became an entrepreneur. Like, officially, and founded my own company. I didn't intend to do that. I intended just to have a product to get hired. When people started hiring me to show my doc, then what I ended up doing was I started creating curriculums, and then the other thing is that I would bring...
What type of curriculums?
So training modules. So for instance, like if they brought us in, then there would be like a training component or more of like an educational component. So what did you see in the doc? How did you process this? Okay. And then the other part that I would do is I would actually bring my aunties with me. So in some ways, we were kind of recreating what people saw in the doc, and then people were able to engage more with the aunties in real life. And I did that with Pico. I did it with Gaudenzia. One of the big things was...
and how many women would there be at these events?
It was sometimes 300, sometimes... Yeah, I can't even tell you how many women I've shown my doc to.
Amazing.
Yeah, I can't tell you. And what was also interesting too is I've always said, of course, I'm focused on the outcomes of Black women because there's some real disparities. There's a real lot of commonality too, just with women in general, and even more importantly, even too with men. I have done this event with men as well. Like, it'll be like a co-ed,
and it's the same documentary.
Yes. And I will tell you, I was so surprised. This is with Pico. And there was a guy because I would do like these focus, these smaller discussion groups. Sure. And I was like, this guy's not going to talk. I'm like, he's feeling like all these women, Yes. And I'll never forget, he just talked about his need to feel needed, and that hit me, I was honored that he felt that safe to share. And it also, too, just kind of affirmed that there are some things that is part of the human experience, and yes. And I was just...
Because that's my next question. Mm-hmm. Were these only Black women? Women of all colors?
All colors.
And all ages are relating. All ages, all colors. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Relating to this 14-minute documentary. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Amazing.
Yeah. And that's pretty much so that's really how I started my journey into entrepreneurship.
And your company was It's All About Me?
No, It Starts With Me. So that was the name of my doc. So I was like, okay, this be the name of my company, because that's the way I was starting to do the work. Okay. And then I started getting just more clients doing like more communications. Sure. Work, like traditional comms, and then also just starting to do more work around diversity, inclusion, and equity. The thing that was really interesting. Is 2018. Again, and this kind of brings Innovation Philadelphia full circle, and then my work at the NAACP too, in the economic space, I'm hypersensitive to economic trends. So I'm always paying attention to what's happening in terms of the future of work, like opportunities, particularly for Black and brown people, whether it's in entrepreneurship or whatever. Those are things I'm just always paying attention to. Mm-hmm. And so I knew too, just based off of what I was reading, that tech is the future. Mm-hmm. I really knew that, like when I was working in Philly, but I especially knew that over the past several years, that tech was the future. And so in 2018, a friend of mine, interestingly enough, who was an intern of mine at the NAACP, moved to Philly, like completely blossomed, and invited me to a tech conference in Philadelphia. And it was called North Star. It was called by a group called Black and Brown Founders. And they're really big on getting more Black and brown folks and women into technology. Mm-hmm. And at this point, I don't really know anything about technology. Mm-hmm. And so, again, though, as a woman of faith, there were some other things that were happening just in my spirit.
But you have the documentary and you have your company at this point.
Oh, yeah, my company, and I say that to say, but because I am aware of where the future is headed, even in terms of entrepreneurship, right. If you're not being tech enabled or thinking about how to apply technology to your business.
So you were thinking, how can I incorporate this into
my work?
Starts with me.
Exactly. Okay. And yeah, into my work. And not really having anything, but just being mindful, Yes. And one of the things that, I always was aware of in the economic space was this idea of like the manufacturing industry and what that meant for Americans who, once this was their skill set, and then globalization happened, like how they were not able to like swiftly catch up or whatever. And I just didn't want to get left behind, for lack of a better word. You know what I mean? And so I was just like, I'm going to have to reskill, but I just didn't know how, you know? And so when my friend invited me to this event, it's so interesting. I was like, okay, I'm going to go. I don't know anything about tech, but it's for Black folks. That's new. It's in Philly. That's big. And I just made a decision to learn as much as I could about everything, as much as I could, to meet as many people as I could. And what I tell folks is that was the first time. The really beautiful thing for me about working with NAACP in DC is that it was my HBCU experience. That's what I say. To me, it was like Black Panther in a way. Like it was the opportunity to work with so much Black excellence was just Wakanda. Yeah, it was that meant something to me. It kind of reshaped what I was capable of. And when I went to the Black and Brown Founders, it was the first time I saw these Black technologists who were doing really amazing stuff in the tech space. And I was just like, what is this? I've never seen this before. I've never heard of this before. So that's how that seed was planted. And because I had no idea what it was, I just decided to just talk to people, follow up, things like that. and began to really think about how I might be able to apply this to my work, but not seeing any natural direct connection. At that point, I didn't see any direct connection. 2019, my sister gifted me with a membership to a place, I don't know if you're familiar, called CIC. It's the Cambridge Innovation Center. It's in the Science Center. And so it's a working space, but particularly for technologists. Anyone, it could be any type of startup, but especially has like a tech bend, if you will.
So if you have a business or if you have a startup.
Yeah, you can work out of, so just like...
it's an incubator? Or?
No, just kind of like WeWork.
Yes.
So it's a workspace.
Yes.
But it's called CIC. Have you ever heard of Venture Cafe?
No,
okay. Because this CIC had just opened, so still relatively new, but it was this really cool workspace in Philly, and they just opened. That was the thing too, they just opened. I went to this tech conference in 2018 in October.
Okay.
They opened in 2018 of November.
Okay.
So I was at their first cohort in the space.
Yes.
And so they were still kind of just like, expanding, getting more people in.
Workspace, but in that workspace you collaborate and you talk and you share. And
so there's other like tech, and even to it, and it kind of goes back to this whole Smith idea. Even being in an environment that's tech,
yes,
even
you start to
exactly,
think
you're just there. So it's just like that's where you are.
You absorb it.
Exactly,
yes.
And what was interesting, I didn't mention the big thing for me when I went to the North Star conference is there's a woman named Arlen Hamilton. I had just heard about Arlen Hamilton. She is a Black venture capitalist. And she talked about, I can't even remember, it was like a Black woman's fund. Like she was funding Black women-owned businesses. Okay. And it was big news. It was on WHYY, everything like that. She has her fund, or not her fund, but her business called Backstage Capital. Okay. And it's known for just funding underrepresented groups. And so she was at this North Star event, right? So that's how I became more familiar with Backstage Capital. At CIC, what happened was Backstage Capital moved in their accelerator.
Oh.
So, and it was literally right across from my workspace. So now I'm seeing these Black technologists every day in this accelerator. I'm watching them going in and out. I'm watching them run to meetings. I'm watching them do their pitches. And I'm just watching. And I always thought it was interesting because I'm like, well, I remember still talking to the person. She's like, oh, yeah, Backstage is moving in. So Arlen was there, So in 2019, that was my experience. I'm working across from an accelerator. Yes. Then they also launched what's called Venture Cafe, which is programming every Thursday. They still do it. I highly recommend it. All different programming around business, technology. It's a great program. They do it every Thursday. And because I was in the space and I was so new, I just went. Like, it would be like from 3 to 7. They would have different people coming in as mentorings. I talked to a guy who worked on autonomous cars. I mean, there's all these different people, especially technologists, I'm talking to. So I did say all that to say that was my environment.
Fascinating.
That was my environment in 2019. That's where I was. So I'm kind of still absorbing, not thinking anything of it. So then if you go to 2020, and this kind of brings us to Hey Auntie, is that so you have me doing this doc, and I'm like showing the film, I'm connecting with people. There's a real need for this type of support. Then in 2018, 2019, I'm in this tech space where I'm learning about all these different tools. I'm seeing Black founders, I'm seeing women founders. I'm hearing different ways to think about your business, especially in terms of scalability. And then in 2020, we have, well, this might also be helpful. At the top of 2020, I had went to Africa to visit a good friend of mine. That's a whole separate story, so I'll have to loop you into that later. But she was a friend from high school. She was in Africa doing very well. So she invited me and my sisters, whatever, out. And we were in Zambia, Tanzania, and South Africa. I've been to Africa before, but more for mission. So this is my first time doing it, like, for pleasure.
Yes.
And when I tell you it was like Wakanda. Like the one of the things that I think I've always struggled with, even though I remember I was an entrepreneur when I was a kid, I sold candy, was feeling like I couldn't be an entrepreneur. There was a part of me that just felt like that that I was better working for someone. And there's no harm in working for someone. I have no problem collecting a paycheck. But I just didn't know if I had that capacity to really create my own business and for it to be successful. And when I was in Africa and I connected with so many Black business owners and who were just, and I'm talking about just even kids, just innovators, creative, resilient, there was kind of this kind of like identity thing that I didn't realize I needed. But I really received. And then just in terms of seeing the opportunity and potential there, my mind was just being constantly expanded. Because I was just like...
So you were in South Africa?
Yeah. So you mean it's south? If you mean like geographically. But I was in South Africa, but I was in... the southern part. The southern part of Africa.
Yeah.
In 3 different countries. And really just being inspired by what my friend was doing. This is my friend from high school. Remember the friend I was telling you about? Then I was learning to kind of like aim higher.
Sure.
And seeing where she had gone and been able to do.
So she was born here but moved to Africa?
Yeah. It's like I said, this would be a separate story. No, she was born in Africa. She moved here when she was like a child. I met her in high school. And basically found out, this may sound wild, her father became president back in Africa.
Okay.
Of a country.
Okay.
And so she moved back there, very similar, very humble, and worked her way up. Came back, invested in the community, started working with women there, and then just got elected to like government, like local government. And so she invited us back.
Okay, so she was a government official.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and so so she invited. So now this is like she had left 2015. Actually, the same time she left in March, and I left in August. So we kind of made similar transitions in the same year. She left, meaning she went back to Zambia. And in March of 2015, I came home to Philly.
Gotcha. We both went home.
As I said, we both went home in the same year. And so just
for the same reason, pretty much?
Yeah. And her really kind of just rebuilding connection and community with her other part of her family.
Yes.
There. And just seeing her flourish real like...
So it's interesting. Mm-hmm. You were exposed to technology, but it was only when you went to Africa that you felt that I'm capable of this too.
Yeah, I think I thought that I was capable.
Meaning entrepreneurship.
Entrepreneurship.
You had already proven the success with the business, but it was still a very small business.
Yeah.
And the idea of expanding it and making it more. There was maybe a connection with technology, but you weren't really seeing
I wasn't.
But when you went to Africa, it all became possible.
Yeah. I mean, first, I always say God, obviously.
Yes.
But seeing... Because again, even if we could talk about just Black folks and identity, right? And just the things that you hear about yourself, you see about yourself.
Yes.
Me, again, when I talk about being a young Black girl.
But you were seeing that with the IT people.
Yeah, I was seeing
what was different?
I couldn't tell you.
Okay.
I can't tell you. I think
well, it put a lie to the whole thing about Africa.
Oh yeah.
And being a dark continent.
Yeah. Oh
and
yeah.
Subpar and so
and
you
maybe,
got to see.
Yeah,
that,
and maybe it was that thing too. It's just like it's the same message, but it's just being repeated.
That's right.
Which a lot of times is the story of my life. It's like you gotta hear the same thing over and over again.
Yes.
For it to sink in. But I think in Africa, it just hit me super hard. Even if we go back to me just when I talk about being at Smith.
Yes.
And I was thinking about who gets to tell these stories.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And I'm thinking, who's telling us these stories?
Yes.
And I'm constantly thinking, if people saw what I saw there, the thing that Black folks would always say to me in Africa is they see we're not the bush. That's what they will always say to me. We're not the bush. And I'm looking at them like, y'all clearly not. You know what I mean? Yes. The caliber and the scale. But even aside from just what I saw.
And it's not what we hear, and it's not what we think of.
No.
It's not what we see in the news.
No.
Yes.
And I believe, and there's a reason for that.
There is.
There is. And I think that was the last part. For a long story long, we went to Soweto. And, we were able to see Nelson Mandela's home and Desmond Tutu's home.
Yes.
And we went to this museum. I think his name was Harry Peterson. And they were talking about, you know, when apartheid was kind of coming to an end. I think it was like the Afrikaners. Is that right? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the big thing is that they did not want Black kids to know their identity. So they wanted to teach a certain curriculum in the schools. They wanted to take out the Black kids curriculum and put in this other curriculum. And the kids revolted. They protest. And Harry Peterson, I hope I'm not getting his name wrong, he was shot and killed by the police. And I remember thinking, that is how dangerous it is for Black folks to know their identity. That you would assault children. You know what I mean? Like really? Like, just these kids, they just wanted to know who they were. And that was a threat, you know? Mm-hmm. And that just, I think that's what it was that really hit me, you know? And so that's really what I mean, like, it just hit me different, because I'm just like, just knowing if Black folks really knew, you know, that is what's all. And I remember even when I was working when I was working, even now I hear people talking about, like, you know, COVID, and a lot of Black families are bringing their children into pods, or they're like teaching them or whatever. And it's interesting because for some of them, they feel like this is the first time it's happened. I'm like, no, Black folks used to teach. Black folks, they used to be homeschooled. And I remember I was in Oakland, and there was a school there, the Panthers. You know, they were big on education. And I'll never forget, they were interviewing one of the Panthers, and they were trying to understand, one of the women, and trying to understand why their kids were doing so well. And they were like, oh, is it because, you know, this. And I'll never forget, she said, it's because they know who they are. It's because they know who they are, you know? And so I think it was that part for Africa for me. It was like, this is what they're fighting for you not to know.
Yes. To see the real Africa.
Because if you knew, because I was in there, I'm like, and it's even funny because, you know, there were times when I was at the White House, I was at the, you know, I'm in the most, I'm like, you were so smart that you built this country.
Oh, absolutely.
And I remember I was telling someone that, I'm like, how in the world can you build a country, but you can't build a business? I'm interrogating myself. I'm like, wait, you can make somebody else successful, but you can't make, you know, yourself. So I guess that's what the African trip did for me. I just started interrogating myself more deeply. It's like, your labor, it's something about your labor is good if it's for someone else. Right. But if it's for yourself, then it's not good enough. It just didn't, you know, so all I have to say, so that's at the same.
That was a moment.
It was a huge moment for me. And so